Um, so I understand that you have a very unique outlook and passion when it comes to programming recitals,
Mm,
where you pair lesser known works with the more famous works such as a Beethoven sonata or Brahms sonata. I
mhm,
also understand that you have worked closely in the past with current composers, and I believe even going as far as commissioning works and working closely in that sense. Can you talk a little bit about when and where you developed this passion for playing more modern works and how you
mm.
believe this endeavor in particular has helped you grow as an artist today?
Yeah, well, I guess it's a very big question, but but I would say that from the beginning of when I really got serious about music and really started falling in love with it, that had a lot to do with actually the discovery of certain repertoire and my particular interest for uncovering pieces that maybe I felt, I wondered why is this not appearing in concert
Mhm.
as much as it should, or some works that maybe were underappreciated, and so I've always had that side of my musical self that wants to champion pieces that maybe could use a little bit of advocacy. Um, and I think it was discovering these pieces that also helped me gain a lot of my technical facility.
Mhm.
Sort of, I had at the, when I was a teenager, I studied with a teacher who he was a really wonderful musician and cellist named Peter Wyrick, who played in the San Francisco Symphony, and um, and he would had a very open-minded approach to the repertoire that I was playing, and so I could bring pieces to him, and he wasn't so much assigning them. So sometimes I would pick things that maybe musically or technically speaking were a little bit beyond my capacity at the time. For instance, when I was 14 or 15 years old, the big piece that I wanted to play was the Third Cello Suite by Benjamin Britten. And but because I loved the piece so much,
Mhm.
I sort of needed to discover aspects of my playing that would allow me to realize the piece. And so,
Mhm.
anyway, it's just a long explanation to sort of illustrate my own feelings about it, which is that for me, it's actually so much about the repertoire. And then as time went on, I became increasingly interested in how to combine pieces on a program and how
Mhm.
they talk to each other. Usually from the perspective of what I would want to hear in a concert.
Mhm.
um, and I think I had great people to look up to in that regard as well. Like one of the things that I really appreciate about Michael Tilson Thomas, who has been a very important mentor to me in my life, was his programming and also his championing of works of all kinds, but particularly 20th century American works and certainly contemporary composers. So I grew up with that being normal.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, as time went on, I started to program my own 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 concert experiences. And as you mentioned, I do like to pair usually known or beloved works with things that are um, maybe a little bit more rarely appearing in concert. But usually
Right.
I try to tie them together conceptually or through a feeling or through a sound world, a sort of story that the whole program musically can tell. For instance, just last week in Cleveland, I did a solo cello program, and it was three pieces: the C major cello suite by Bach,
Mhm.
which of course is a staple of the repertoire. The 10 solo cello preludes by Gubaidulina,
Mhm.
and then a piece called Jaguar Songs by Paul Desen, who's a
Mhm.
Venezuelan composer and cellist who just passed away last year. And so two of the three on the program were probably things that I would say vast majority, if not all of the audience, didn't know all three.
Sure.
But I tied them together through this theme of cello dualities
Mhm.
and this idea of duality being expressed in three different ways. So in the Bach, it's the coexistence of structure and
Mm.
improvisation.
Yeah.
Um, in Gubaidulina, it's through contrast and sort of an inward expression versus outward expression, going
Mhm.
between those two worlds. And then in the Paul de Seine, it's kind of a superimposition of folkloric influences in music and like the contemporary world. And so this idea of duality was something that served as like a theme which connected the three pieces.
Mm.
Also at this festival, the larger theme of the festival was sacred and profane. And
Mm.
the Paul de Sen's piece, Jaguar Songs, focuses a lot on the symbol of the jaguar in Amazonian culture and taking this idea of, I took inspiration from this idea of sacred nature.
Mm.
And I think it's particularly evident in the Amazonian folklore and symbol of the jaguar in this piece, which represents, on the one hand, represents death and the parts of ourself that we're running away from, sort of the shadow, but also the jaguar symbolizes at the same time the
Mm.
spirit, which upon death would help people transition into the afterlife, into the spiritual realm.
Mm.
And so again, it's its own duality. And so I really like playing with these themes
Yeah.
and and um, and creating concerts which sort of have that point of interest,
Yeah.
and hopefully they're interesting for other people too. But
Yeah.
it's fun because it's every single context, every place I play, every collaborator
Yeah.
will sort of make me think in a different way. Like, how can I create something
Mm.
that feels right for this moment in this
Right.
concert? And so
Right.
it's a very evolving and always current process.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Well,
you
and
asked, sorry, you asked about
go for it.
as well. That's also something that I really love to anytime I have the chance to work with living composers. And of
Mm.
course, with a lot of music of the past, it's already gone through many generations of, some works survive, others
Right.
fade away. And so I think working with contemporary composers, you have to have a certain element of openness to really dedicating yourself to a vision, and maybe
Mm.
you might find certain pieces more or less successful, but there's so much to discover. And I mean, it's the music of our time, so I just think
Yeah.
it's so important. And I also learn a lot from certain composers that I've worked with. Actually, my last summer at Marlborough 2 years ago, I
Mm.
worked with Sir George Benjamin, and
Oh.
I don't think I've ever met anybody with such incredible ears. Like, we
Mm.
were playing his operetta Into the Little Hill, which is,
Mm.
many instruments on stage, and a lot of the textures are like very, very quiet, little abrupt interruptions of pitches or a held note.
Mm.
And if something was off just like even slightly, even if it was, you thought, I can barely hear myself playing,
Yeah.
um,
Right.
but he would, all of a sudden just be, uh, um, he would immediately be able to recognize everything that was going on. And so his concept for his music was so clear and so defined in his head,
Mm.
that it was so inspiring to step into that world. And I just found myself, I really wanted to be able to achieve what he
Yeah.
was imagining, and that process was so exciting. And then on the other hand, I have a good friend named Andrew Moses who lives
Mhm.
in Los Angeles, and he's a really, really interesting composer these days. He is, I think doing a lot of installation work in museums. So they're kind of
Mm.
audio, visual, conceptual works of art. Um, I met him actually through chamber music. He's also a
Mm.
clarinet player. And when we were, I
Oh.
think, 13, 14 years old. We went to the Yellow Barn Young Artists program in
Oh,
Vermont,
yeah.
actually not far from where I am now. And we
Hmm.
played the Brahms clarinet quintet together. And
Okay.
then I really enjoyed making music with him. And then later on, when I was studying at the Curtis Institute of Music, he showed
Hmm.
up as a composer, and I had some experiences listening to some of his works where I was just moved to. It's like tears isn't even. It was more like kind of like I was sort of destroyed emotionally from but I couldn't tell you exactly why. And and so I that's a voice as a composer and just what he's able to achieve in the moment in his art that I felt very inspired by that. And so when I had the opportunity finally to commission him through this festival in Hong Kong, he was like the first composer that I wanted to that I thought of contacting. So he wrote a very interesting piece for me called Ecstatic Imminence for cello, percussion, and electronics.
Oh.
And part of the part of the one of the movements of the piece involves also a feedback loop. So basically, there's the cello and there's the percussion instrument called a thunder sheet, which is basically a big sheet of metal that if you hit it, it makes a kind of a thunder sound. And
Yeah.
we each had a small microphone and a small speaker that were connected to each other, processed through a computer that
Hmm.
Andrew was the composer was controlling, and through what's called spectral analysis. So
Hmm.
if you have a sonority with many different pitches contained
Hmm.
inside, it can pick out, like let's say the five most prominent frequencies from
Hmm.
that, and then from the cello, and then it would funnel those into the thunder sheet and vice versa. So it'd be back and
Yeah.
forth. And so what that means is that every performance of the piece will be slightly different. Um, but somehow the intimacy of when Haruka, my collaborator, would
Mhm.
move the speaker on the thunder sheet, I could physically feel something happening in my instrument, and this it was so beautiful on so many levels. But the thing I love about Andrew's music is that the sound world that he's creating and the music itself as a visceral sound experience is always so considered and so
Mhm.
central to the experience. So
Yeah.
anyway, he's somebody that I think is a great composer
Hmm.
musically, but also his works have a sort of conceptual and experiential resonance for the
Hmm.
audience. So yeah, those are just two examples like on different ends of the spectrum that I just find it so interesting, and I get very inspired when I get to work with composers like that.
Yeah. No, and I can tell based on the way you speak about this, how much love and joy you have for this particular endeavor. And, I really appreciate the fact that you are trying to give exposure to these lesser known works or these modern works because as much as I love, the meat and potatoes of our repertoire with the Beethovens and the Rachmaninoffs and all that, I think it's so easy to go to a recital today and you just see like three big sonatas being programmed. And I mean, that's great and all, but I mean, I kind of liken recital programming to cooking where, each piece is like a different flavor or seasoning. And if you get a recital of like a lot of Beethoven, Schumann, the likes, it's almost like you're just adding a bunch of salt and not a lot else, right? So I love that you're really adding flavor, I guess, for lack of better phrase,
Mm-hmm.
to your program. So that's really wonderful.
Yeah, well, I think regarding what you said, I think the most important element that I feel when I'm going to concerts is that
Mhm.
even if it is an all Beethoven program or whatever else, it usually to me will be successful if the performer really had a reason for wanting to
Mm,
do it. So to me, I think just everybody has a different interests.
yeah.
Um, but I think, yeah, many different kinds of programs can be successful. I just think that the authenticity of the intention and
Yeah.
why do you want to share it, and also considering thinking from the audience's perspective. A lot of times I think um, you build a relationship with an audience sometimes over the period of years. For instance, in Cleveland, it's a great example of a place that I've been going there almost for 10 years. And so um, I was really touched that my concert like sold out very
Mhm.
quickly after it became available. And even with, the majority of the program, a lot of people would say, oh, that's not going to sell tickets,
Mhm.
but actually I think it has to do with building a relationship, building trust, and always having a way in for different
Mhm.
people. And depending on the audience, also moderating and guiding people through it and sharing
Yeah.
why you chose those pieces and what excites you.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's just what I think about the programming, because I think
Yeah.
everybody finds different things that work for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. The intent behind why you're
Mhm.
programming the pieces you're programming. That's great.